When you think of South Korea today, what comes to mind? K-pop, incredible food, cutting-edge technology like Samsung, maybe award-winning films. It's a global cultural and economic giant. But what if I told you that behind this incredible success story, behind the shiny exterior of the Miracle on the Han River, lies a secret so dark it was buried for decades? Today, we're talking about Brothers' Home, a name that, for thousands, wasn't a home, but a concentration camp. This isn't just a sad story from the past. It's a chilling look at how a nation, desperate to create a perfect image for the world, sacrificed its own people. To understand how Brothers' Home could even exist, you have to go back to the 1950s. The Korean War left the country in ruins. Streets were filled with casualties of poverty and war, the homeless, orphans, and the vulnerable. For South Korea's leaders, this was a PR problem. Locked in an ideological battle with North Korea, they wanted to show the West that they were modern, prosperous, and orderly. So what do you do with people who don't fit that perfect picture? Under the military government of the 60s and 70s, the answer was horrifying: cleanse the streets. In 1975, the government issued Ministry Directive 410, giving police power to round up vagrants. But their definition was so broad, it included almost anyone: disabled people, children, teenagers with ripped jeans, or anyone who might prevent a healthy social order. No trial, no due process. Survivors say consent and family notification were a joke. Then came the 80s. South Korea won the bid for the 1986 Asian Games and 1988 Seoul Olympics. President Chun Doo-hwan ordered, "Get the panhandlers off the streets." National image was everything. The human cost didn't matter. Thousands were sent to 36 state-sponsored facilities. But the biggest and most brutal was Brothers' Home. Located in Busan, Brothers' Home started as an orphanage. By the 1970s, it had become a monster. At its peak, it held nearly 4,000 people. Korean media would later call it Korea's Auschwitz. Officially, it was for the homeless, but survivors say only about 10% were homeless. The rest? Just people grabbed off the street. A boy named Troy, accused of stealing bread. A 10-year-old separated from his mom at a train station. A young man, Lim, grabbed by police after a trip to the beach. Once you entered those gates, you entered a living nightmare. If you think this is already horrifying, what happened inside Brothers' Home is even darker. The man in charge, Park In-Geun, ran Brothers' Home like his personal kingdom. He created a military-style system forcing inmates to become commanders and guards, turning prisoners against each other. Abuse was constant. Survivors talk about beatings for hours for the smallest mistake. One person steps out of line, and entire platoons of 120 people would be beaten brutally. Park reportedly kept clubs in his office and personally beat 40 to 50 people to death. Sexual violence was rampant, especially against children. Survivors as young as 10 describe being assaulted almost nightly for years. To keep everyone subdued, they were drugged. Records show a single year's purchase of 250,000 antipsychotic pills. Then there was forced labor. Inmates worked in 20 factories, making clothes and toothpicks from dawn till midnight, 6 days a week. One survivor reported earning just $160 total for years of slave labor. The official death toll is 657 people, but experts believe the real number is in the thousands. Bodies were buried in secret, cremated, or even sold to hospitals for dissection. For over a decade, Brothers' Home operated with government approval. Park In-Geun was even awarded medals for his social welfare work. But in late 1986, a local hunter reported seeing workers beaten at a construction site. The story reached prosecutor Kim Young-won, who raided the facility in January 1987. What he found was pure horror. Over 100 people confirmed stories of kidnapping and slave labor. In Park's safe, he found proof of massive embezzlement, equivalent to over $10 million today. Finally, it seemed justice was coming. Park was arrested and sentenced to 10 years, but on appeal, his most serious charge, illegal confinement, was dropped. The court ruled that because he operated under government orders, he couldn't be punished for it. His sentence was slashed to 2.5 years for embezzlement, not for torture, not for rape, not for the hundreds of deaths. For survivors, release didn't end their suffering. They carried deep trauma and were shunned by a society that didn't want to hear their story. Many took their own lives, but some refused to stay silent. People like Han Jong-sun, taken as a boy. In 2012, he stood outside the National Assembly for a full year in a one-man protest. He wrote a book, went on hunger strikes, and walked 500 kilometers to demand an apology. Their persistence worked. In 2024, the courts finally ruled in survivors' favor, awarding compensation and acknowledging the state's responsibility. That same year, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission declared the government responsible for Brothers Home's human rights violations. For survivors, it was never about money, it was about recognition. But the commission uncovered another gut-wrenching secret. Brothers Home was part of an international adoption scandal. Dozens of children, potentially thousands, were sent overseas for adoption. Their identities were faked to sell them to agencies in the US and Europe connected to military leadership. Imagine being a child, stolen from your parents, trafficked to another country under the guise of adoption. A betrayal on every level. Park In-Geun died in 2016, never facing real justice. His family moved to Australia, investing stolen money in property, a golf range, a sports complex. Journalists who tracked them say they refused to apologize or even answer for what they did. You might have seen Brothers Home compared to Squid Game, but there's a massive difference. In Squid Game, characters chose to play. The inmates of Brothers Home had no choice. They were kidnapped. They were slaves in a system run by monsters, with the full backing of their own government. South Korea's economic miracle is real, but it was built on the broken bodies and spirits of its most vulnerable citizens. The survivors have shown us what true courage looks like. Their fight isn't just about correcting a historical wrong, it's about ensuring we look past shiny surfaces and listen to stories that societies try to bury. They waited half a century for the world to hear their truth. The least we can do now is make sure they are never forgotten. Thank you so much for joining me on Truly Chilling. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing to my channel. A like on this video also really helps us reach more people. And, as always, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you again for your time and for your support, and I'll see you in the next one.